course has a positive side. On the positive side, he has presented his understanding of Quran and Hadith. And on the negative side, it is a critique of the Western religious, materialistic society and social setup. Now the floor is open for discussion. Yes, please.
I read in the book that middle-aged women are allowed more freedom to go out in society. At what age does middle age start?
It's not middle age, it's old age. But then only there is a relaxation in the dress code. That's all.
Not in
She
her
doesn't need to
mobility?
cover her hair, etc. But that is the only thing.
So that doesn't.
Not that she should go out
She
and
cannot go to the
no.
mosque to pray.
No, it's not forbidden.
It is not forbidden.
Not forbidden. But we have to have separate lines in the mosque for the women. Not intermixing. And the lines of the women have to be behind. So there are restrictions about that.
First of all, I want to thank you for your clear lectures. I think it's very important for us in the West to understand Islam, and your presentation of it was very helpful to me. So I really want to thank you. I'm grateful for being here, and it's an important event in my life.
Thanks.
One of the things that I'm interested in is to know whether in the Muslim world, have there been any empirical studies about the happiness of families? Do you know that Muslim families are so much happier than families in the West, empirically? Because I cite this because of the experience we had when we went to Afghanistan, where women have been, pretty much subjected to some pretty terrible treatment in terms of not being allowed any educational opportunities and being treated pretty much like chattel. I mean, at least that's the experience I've been getting, I've been reading. And even in today's newspaper that came through the auspices of the hotel, there was an article that talked about the sadness that families felt when daughters were born into their home. And the idea of having daughters rather than sons seemed to be a very negative kind of experience for Islamic families. And I just wondered what your reaction to those kind of ideas might be.
Actually, we Muslims are not practicing Islam fully. And we are under the influence of our Hindu background on one side and the Western civilization on the other side. We are between the two and not practicing Islam. Now, according to Islam, a widow must be married. If she is not very old, must be married. Islam doesn't like that you should remain bachelor. Marry. This is nature's demand. If you don't marry, you will go astray, this way or that way. So actually, now the happiness of the family, I have discussed, I think, the respect for the elders and the parents, and then the parents investing whole and soul into their offsprings. They don't keep anything, saving anything for their old age, no. So everything has a result. The psychology is different. About Afghanistan, you are misinformed. During the Taliban period, actually the co-education was finished and stopped. And they had not till the time to establish girls' schools and girls' colleges. They were not against the education of girls and women. Actually, they didn't have the time. So, they didn't stop the education, and then they don't prevent women from education. They had the plan to start girls' colleges, girls' schools, etc., etc. I might have missed some of your point.
Well, I just wondered if there were empirical studies. You sort of announced to us that Muslim families are happy, but is there any documentation scientifically or empirically that is the case any more so than in the West?
No, no documentation. And I think this is the general feeling of all people in the West and East.
Yeah.
The family structure in Islam and among the Muslims are still, to this date, although there are influences from the East and from the West.
My point is that in the West we know that families aren't happy, that marriage is in trouble because we've studied families. So it's been a kind of empirical study. We know this. I don't know that it's true in the Muslim world.
But here, the percentage of divorce is very little, very small. Once married, you are married forever. It's whole life.
That doesn't necessarily make for happiness.
Yes, why not? You will remain together if you are both happy.
Can I say one thing? Comment.
This
Now,
is, let me follow this. If people stay married together, that means they may be happy.
Yes.
It also could mean that they may not be happy. I mean, if divorce in a society is frowned upon, which it is, and or even not allowed unless the man says it is all right, then is it not possible that in some families or many families, we could have a very unhappy situation? We could have an unhappy situation, perhaps most especially with the woman. Is that not possible?
But the teaching of Islam is that you get separated if you are not happy among yourself. And the woman can get the divorce without the consent of the husband through court. Court will give the verdict, you are separate now. But still, this percentage of divorce here is very low, very low.
can I add one thing?
Go ahead.
Yeah, just because it is related to the subject.
Yes.
Now, in Muslim countries, mostly men has the right of divorce. If he says you are divorced, finished. But still, the rate of divorce is very low. This is a sign, okay? Now, in West, we have to go to court, etc., etc. But here is not so. If man says to his wife, you are divorced, finished. But still, the rate of divorce, like Turkey, is very low. And although we have a lot of very severe economic conditions, etc., but still rate of divorce is almost zero. But this is a sign. I think it's an answer to
A very pertinent point.
Dr. Ralph's question. Yeah. I mean, this is a sign. It is an empirical study.
Yes.
Just a comment from my family background. My grandfather divorced my grandmother at least 1 million times, and she never left him. That's true, and he was in a state of anger.
You are exaggerating.
No,
There might not be million days in their lives.
I mean, lots of times. She never left him.
But on the humorous tone, I'll come back after Louis.
First of all, again, it's a privilege for me to be here, to be at this table.
Thank you.
My question is about polygamy.
Polygamy, yes, it is allowed. But it is not imperative that you must marry more than one or two or three. It is allowed. And the grounds are, number one, there are certain occasions. For example, there's war. In the First World War, Second World War, how many men perished? Now women, they were without husbands. If there's polygamy, they will also be living normal human life. Secondly, the sexual urge in males is not equal in all of them. The lust for wealth is not equal among all the humans. In the same way, the sexual urge. There might be certain males who are so much stronger in their sexual urge that one wife can't do it. Because the sexual process in women is restricted, interrupted by the periods, by pregnancy, and so on and so forth. So polygamy is natural, but it is not essential.
So this could be one of
the reasons for the lower rate of divorce then?
That?
Lower rate of
Divorce this could be one of the reasons.
No.
Because in the States, this would be considered, in the States, what I mean is in Christian marriage, this is considered adultery.
To have second wife is adultery.
Yeah.
Yes, no, not in Islam. There you have to divorce one wife to have another one. Yes, that is why that is one factor for the greater number of divorces.
We call it serial.
Or you have to accuse her of some adultery and some, something, and then only can the, Christian marriage can be finished. So these are things,
I have at you again. Sorry, now that I've started. You said earlier in your lecture that the Quran speaks to human equality. There's no one higher or lower, and so forth. And then you said it's whatever you have in your heart that counts. And I wonder if it's more than that. It's not only what's in your heart, it's what you do. It's what you do. It's your actions. We talk about orthodoxy, right thinking, but we also talk about orthopraxy, right doing. Both are very, very important.
Yes, I admit.
I guess you recognize it.
I accept.
But in terms of equality in marriage, you say there is no equality.
There is no
equality in marriage. That the man is head of the woman.
Yes, yes.
But in our conception of marriage, it's a partnership. The man and the woman engage in a partnership. Some have more skills, perhaps in business or in some other respect than the other, and so they contribute to the good of the whole, rather than kind of strict division of labor. So there is this kind of sharing that in a good marriage takes place. At least that's been my experience, and the experience of people who have been involved in good marriages. It's not a superior-inferior kind of relationship.
I didn't use these words for that relationship.
But they sounded like it.
Actually, marriage is a partnership. But even in partnership, if you have a common business with your friend, maybe you own 2/3 and the other one 1/3. So equality in authority and in rights, in the administration of the family, that is not there. You have to have one on top. Otherwise there will be chaos.
No, I don't agree. At least that's not been my
Yes, you are free to disagree.
It's not for me to say. Okay.
Mr. Nirmal Singh, please.
Well, firstly, I something in a lighter vein. So I was thinking that there is a window of opportunity for me here in something that you said, that if you bring up 2 daughters, educate them, and marry them, you have a place reserved for you in paradise. My wife and we have done it for 3 daughters.
But you have to be a Muslim to qualify for that.
Well, but I thought that with 3, a second-class citizen might make it.
You need to have another one because you are 2.
Dr. Ian Markham. I want to just focus a little bit on your social segregation part of your talk, where you talked about the fact it's very important in the Islamic society that the sexes are kept separate. And that includes education and hospitals and universities.
All spheres of life.
All spheres of life. Is there any theology in Islam which would stress the fact that when God created men and women, God created 2 genders that bring different insights, different perspectives, different ideas, which can complement and enhance the other. And that therefore, in social relations between the sexes, it's good that they're often together, because it means that
the ideas that shape an institution or an organization have the different perspectives of the two genders, which enhances life generally. And isn't there any sort of idea that there's something rich and captivating about the diversity of God's creation and the fact that we ought to enjoy that sexual gender difference as part of that diversity?
Enjoy your wives, not others.
Well,
actually God has created and God has given us the law, the straight path. And He ordained in the very beginning, Imma yatiyannakum minni hudan, whatever guidance comes to you from me, you have to accept it and obey it. So that is the law. You have to obey it. And He only knows what you are speculating. Allah knows all these things. But if there is intermixing, is there not the danger that you fall in love?
Well, if I may have a quick supplementary, many religious traditions are committed to the idea that the best way to avoid sin is to avoid temptation. Right?
Yes.
And that's the assumption you're making.
Yes, yes.
And that's true. You know, if it's very unwise for me to go to a brothel if I want to remain faithful to my wife, and therefore I should avoid brothels, and that's a good ethical principle. But it's how far you take that. And to insist on total separateness seems to be very, very extreme. Surely...
At home, the brothers and sisters are not separate. They are living with each other. The father and mother are there. They are not separated. You know, this concept of marriage, you know, no man can ever imagine that he can marry his sister. So all those, you know, sexual thinking and imagination won't come at all. But where there is a chance for marriage, then you know your sexual urge and your desires, they come into play. So this is it about Islam and our, you know, teachings.
Would you say that Islam and its social system, as you describe it, is almost identical with the Jewish social system?
We know that the law of Moses was Islamic. And there are few changes only in the law of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you know, they don't take pork. We don't take pork. It's forbidden. It's forbidden. In the same way, you know, many things are common. Regarding law and Sharia, the Muslims and Jews are nearest to each other. Regarding the person of Jesus, the Muslims and Christians are very close to each other. We believe in the virgin birth of Jesus. We believe in his miracles. We believe he was taken to heaven alive. Only difference is that we don't believe that he was crucified. Someone else was crucified. And that clue I got from the gospel according to Barnabas, that it was Judas Iscariot whose features were changed to those of Jesus. And he was crucified, and rightly, because he betrayed Jesus. So we think that he was taken to the heavens before he was arrested. And the features of Judas Iscariot were changed to the features of Jesus. He was crucified, and Allah has taken Jesus, and he will come. The second coming of Jesus is absolutely common between Muslims and Christians.
May I follow Roger, since he... I had a question which I'll ask, but briefly, I suppose the answer to you, Roger, is that there is no one social system within Judaism. And if I take traditional Judaism as defined in the Talmud, which is authoritative, then the position of women in that traditional Judaism is far inferior to the position of women in Islam. And in regard to marriage and in regard to sex, there are many similarities. But in other ways, in terms of equality, that I understand that women have in Islam, there is in the most traditional part of Judaism no such equality whatsoever. And if I had time, which would be more than 5 or 6 days fully, I suppose that I could specify this. And I think everyone here would be terribly shocked at how bad the situation is. But I want to emphasize finally here in this comment that that is only true in one part of Judaism. So there's no one social system. But now, having said that, I have one brief question for you that goes right to the beginning, and it's a question that comes from the very beginning of your talk this afternoon, when you said individuals, male and female, are born equal, totally equal, and then, of course, what they do in their lives, you mentioned one thing they do. If some acquire far more knowledge than others, then that puts them at a higher status. But my question is this: would you not agree that everyone is not born totally equal? Some people, some men and some women, are born with far more intellectual qualities than others. That is verifiable. If that is the case, then we would expect what has undoubtedly been the case, that those who are born with far more intellectual abilities are able in their lifetime to acquire far more knowledge, and if indeed that puts them at a higher status, then my question is it not the case that perhaps then everyone is not born equally?
I again say and stress that by birth they are equal absolutely. When, due to their higher intelligence, they acquire more knowledge, more wisdom, then they become superior. But the status as humans is absolutely equal.
As moral agents, as persons.
Yes, sister.
I have been...
And Marsh.
If adultery is committed, what are the consequences?
If some unmarried person, male or female, commits, then there are stripes, 100 stripes. If a married man or woman commits it, then he or she is to be stoned to death. And this is the case in Judaism also.
Stoned to death?
Is it there?
It was.
It was. No, that's not why I'm hesitating. I'm hesitating because it has happened. There are, as I'm sure there are in Islam, some Judaic theologians who say it has happened because that is what is ordained from God, but there are many other very traditional Orthodox theologians who would disagree with that. So you are not incorrect that there has been that belief that has happened, but that again is only one aspect of Judaism, and since I myself do not claim to have the true, total, correct Word of God as to which is the most correct interpretation in Judaism, I won't go any further than that, although it's fairly obvious that I would certainly not agree with the stoning to death.
Colleen.
Please.
Yes, Dr. Israr, thank you very much for your lecture tonight and all these days that we've been with you.
Thank you.
I would like to ask a couple of questions and also make a statement, but I'll leave the statement until after you've had a chance to answer the questions. My question has to do with the issue of divorce. And the other, that's one question. Can you delineate some of the consequences of divorce if a man seeks divorce versus if a woman seeks divorce? Maybe that would be instructive for everyone, because there are differences. And could you also talk about it just flew out of my head. Consequences of a man seeking divorce versus a woman seeking divorce from her husband.
Man doesn't seek divorce, he divorces.
Right.
He has the authority to divorce straight off.
So the consequences
But a woman
for him.
has to seek divorce, and we call it khula. And she have to surrender total or a part of the door money that was paid to her at the time of marriage. So that is the law in Islam.
Can I ask, does that include cases where the woman seeks divorce for cause? In other words, the husband has failed in his Islamic duties to her. For example, he's failed to support her or whatever other duties.
Yes. On this ground,
So
she
does
can seek divorce.
And does she still have to seek
Even on
Dawa?
the ground that the wife doesn't like the husband, she can seek divorce. And the Prophet ﷺ decided such. A woman came and said, I don't like him. Then he got her confined to a room which had all, bad things in it. And she remained there for the night. In the morning, the Prophet asked, how you pass your night? This was the best night that I have passed, when my husband was away. So the Prophet decided, okay, you are separated. This is the right of woman.
And if a man divorces his wife, what are his obligations to her? Are there any?
Only for a certain time, he has to support her. 3 months, 4 months, different, financially. And he has to pay, if he has not yet paid the door money, now he has to pay. That's all. Nothing more.
Thank you. I thought of my other question, and it has to do with, I was reading in your monogram on women and the movement, the Tanzeem movement, and the role of women in it. And you did speak in it about the role of women in the revolution, the Islamic revolution, and how their role is different. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, women have a role to play, definitely, alongside with the men, Because the ayah that I quoted, that refers particularly to the revolutionary movement. فَاسْتَجَابَ لَهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ أَنِّي لَا أُضِيعُ عَمَلَ عَامِلٍ مِّنكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنثَىٰ بَعْضُكُم مِّن بَعْضٍ فَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا وَأُخْرِجُوا مِن دِيَارِهِمْ وَأُوذُوا فِي سَبِيلِي وَقَاتَلُوا وَقُتِلُوا لَأُكَفِّرَنَّ عَنْهُمْ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ. In that revolutionary movement, women were with the men. Hijrah to Habsha, men and women both. And one man, one woman, husband and wife, they were martyred by Abu Jahl. So they laid down their lives. But then later on, they prepared their sons to sacrifice their lives for the propagation of Islam. And during the movement, they can propagate Islam to women and to their own family. Men also who are mahram, to the brothers, sons, the uncles, etc., etc. The nephews, you prepare them to propagate Islam. So this is the role of women. We have that section, women's section in Tanzeem-e-Islami. But there is segregation.
Can I revisit? She has a comment. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, and my comment actually, I don't think that you'll accept this, but I'll go ahead and try. My comment comes out of my background in psychology. My bachelor's degree was in psychology, and I've had an abiding interest in it. And my studies have led me to the conclusion that it's a sort of a cliche. I think most people have heard it. Violence begets violence. And the other part of that is that violence does damage to the human soul, both to those who are the recipients of the violence and those who do violence to others are damaged. And there are tons of studies, all kinds of studies in sociology, psychology, that bear this out. When we think about revolution and we think about the suffering, the inevitable suffering on all sides that occurs in revolution, the revolution you talk about. I worry that there would be irreparable damage to human beings, to children, to the psyches of men, women, and children. And I wonder how a good society can come out of beings that are so severely damaged. We know that even in a family, when children are the recipients of violence or women are the recipients of violence in a home, there's damage that never goes away. And that is just, could be beatings, could be abuse of various sorts. Imagine the killing, this kind of violence that revolution inevitably brings. So I worry about this, and I worry about this third stage of your program. And I'd like you to comment on that.
Well, actually, that will be discussed tomorrow, but right now, then we shouldn't punish any criminal. Why to send them to jails? They are damaged psychologically. But for the good of the society, you have to do it. In the same way, to overthrow an oppressive regime, a discriminating regime, an exploitative regime, which is hurting the whole humanity, hurting all men and women, then you have to use some violence. And operating, there's gangrene in the arm, you cut it off. For the benefit of the total body, you have chopped off the arm of the person. So this is a normal procedure.
Yes, yeah, welcome, please.
We haven't used the word feminist yet, feminism or feminist, and I'm very sympathetic to feminism. And I think I'm sympathetic to it for two reasons. The first is that it's clear that in a society where men have had a lot of power, the treatment of women has not been good. And I worry that one outcome of the theology that you've expounded is that women will end up being servants or slaves of the man at home, serving them in whatever way, often perhaps using force to get what they want. And I think that is obviously wrong. For all sorts of religious reasons, I think that's obviously wrong. The second reason I worry, the second reason I'm sympathetic to feminism is because in a society where we share the power with women, then the option of both having a family and having a career are also shared. And I think that's good because it means you get better fathers who take more interest in their children. And you also get a better society because the resources of intellect and ability serve society more effectively. And therefore, a society where feminism is taken seriously is a society where both men and women contribute effectively at home, but also contribute more effectively at work.
Can you tell me what you would definitely mean by feminism?
Feminism is the equality of men and women.
Equality.
Equality.
So part of the equality we admit, but as husband and wife they are not equal. And if the wife is not ready, she can get divorced. But the discipline of the family is more important. And there are two sides. One is legal, the other is moral. Morally, Quran and Hadith, the Prophet say, be kind to the women. Be lenient to them. The best among you are those who treat their women folk in the best way. This is the moral education. And both things go side by side. As I told you, if there is separation, the children belong to father, legally, not mother. But, as I told you, regarding respect and service and doing good, the mother is 3 times more than the father. So you have to balance. The law is there, and then the moral teachings are there.
Roger.
Let me try and be a little bit more critical than what we've been so far. You start off by saying at the very early part, this will not be easily palatable to the Western mind. And I think you're right. And you're right because your social system exists in a vacuum. And you're critical of the Western family because you don't look at the social system in the context in which it exists. Very briefly, I'm going to outline just a little bit of that context. Before 1960s, the divorce rate in Western societies was very low. After 1960, it rose inexorably. And I would be the first to be anxious and worried about what is happening. But it is, by comparison to what you have outlined, a revolutionary social system in the West. And we are learning every generation. And I suspect every generation we produce is better adapted to the world whereby families are controlled by contraception, which is a technical revolution for any social system. And because your social system exists in a vacuum, it seems to us deeply oppressive. And of the one thing that I've heard so far since I've been here, it is that oppression that we find so difficult to accept. Now, of course, it's ideal that old people should be looked after by their families. But you have to look at the context in which the breakdown of families happen, the growth of a capitalist society which you wish to have in your new revolutionized society. And if you have capitalism as you wish to have it, then you will have the same breakdown as we have to the present time.
I said we have a limited capitalism and we have to change the capital. And there are steps. Interest, banned. Speculation, banned. Trading only cash. Or if it is for future, total price is to be paid at the beginning. So the capitalism of West, modern capitalism, and the capitalism of Islam, they are very far apart. And I couldn't understand what you mean by a vacuum. You can say that we are existing in vacuum, but only from one point of view. That a civilization has dominated the whole of the globe. And we are against that civilization. But we are powerless up till now. We dislike it. But we are very much in it. Only we need some Lenin, according to you.
He gave it to you. Roger, he gave it back to you. That's very good.
Can I revisit the issue of segregation from the standpoint of political and social economy? If one looks at the contemporary Muslim societies, empirical Muslim societies, from Indonesia to Morocco, most Muslim societies have not been urbanized yet. This is very clear in the largest Muslim country, Indonesia. It's very clear in Bangladesh. It's very clear in Pakistan. And in the countryside, in peasant economies, women are extremely active in the labor force. And this is very true in tribal societies, in the desert, in the Sahara, in West Africa, in the desert in Arabia. Women are extremely active in the labor force of the desert. which means that throughout human history, women have never been absent, and there has never been segregation because of the economic necessities of life. Now, and this is also true in urban societies. Now, modern contemporary urban societies, there's no segregation between men and women in these societies. And I do understand, that's why I go back to Roja's point about the vacuum that we're talking about, that the kind of revolution that you are calling for seems to be a comprehensive total revolution. It is not just ideological, but economic, political,
Yes,
social,
ideology covers all the
civilizational,
aspects. Yes.
and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And it seems that this is going to be a major task. It is a major task to
It is
solve.
definitely a major task, not an easy task. But, I have seen in the Arabian desert women taking a row of camels, but fully clad, their faces hidden, their hands in gloves, their feet in socks. They were working. In our countryside also, the women, they are not doing any makeup. They have all their body covered up. The satar is there, and they have to work with their men. Where their men are there. Yes. In the field, their mahrams are there. So actually, if we take the whole situation as a whole, it's not very far off.
I do want to revisit this, the power relationship within the family structure, because I find that the key words are obey and obedience. The key word is that the man will be provider. The key word is that the woman will obey and be obedient. Now, and I'm so glad that Ibrahim brought out this fact that women have been and continue to be major economic contributors to family income in all segments of society, irrespective of whatever their faith persuasion may be. There are numerous studies, I myself have carried out in Indian context, and we have found them. So, what I therefore conclude from that position is this, that the man really has not been a provider the way it was expected the man should have been. The women have had to go out and work, and at the same time we place upon them the burden of rearing the family to bring up the children. And if I know the Indo-Pak men, which I think I should know, then we think, my mother thought that sons were God's special gift, and that there is so much of evidence about the infanticide of females in this subcontinent. So men don't want to do much more than what they are doing. The burden is continuously transferring on to women, and they have carried it ever so long. I really don't know why they want to go out and work. I really don't know why they want to go out. I think they should possibly agree with you and say, hey, tell these men to be good providers before they ask me to obey them.
I agree with you, brother. The burden has to be borne by the males, and let me state here, this is the worst exploitation of women. They bear children, they suckle them, they rear them, and they have to go out also to work. A stay-at-home mom is the biggest blessing for the children. We are actually exploiting.
Revolution here.
So I am always speaking of a revolution.
We need a different kind of revolution here, altogether different kind, where we bring
One
about...
aspect of that revolution you dislike, but the other you like it. We should continue our dialogue.
In an ideal Islamic society, perhaps you touched upon that and I may have missed it, but would women be allowed to vote for a president or someone, let's say?
I said in the morning, yes, they will vote. And women who are beyond that age can also be elected for the parliament. Yes. The age which sister referred, you know.
Okay, just another quick question. Regarding women and if they were permitted by the husband to work, would she be expected to share part of her wealth or earnings, I should say, with the husband?
There is nothing haram about it, but she cannot go and work in an environment where there is mixing of men and women. I told she can be a teacher, she can be a lady doctor, she can be a nurse, but you know the working hours of women's duty should be less so that they can look after their...
He's asking about the earnings.
Well, a teacher, if she's working, she is earning.
Is she going to share it with her husband or not?
Is she expected to share the earnings
No.
with the husband?
No, it will be her. But if she does it voluntarily, it's good.
That's a different story. Thank you.
Dr. Markham, last question maybe.
It's
Yes.
been generally accepted that between 5 and 10% of the human population, in whatever country they live, are homosexual. About 5 to 10% of the population is homosexual. How would Islam regard these people? How would they?
It's a very big sin to be punished.
How would they be punished?
That can be a ta'zir, you know. A punishment can be fixed by the state. It has not been mentioned in Quran. We have two types of punishments. One which have been mentioned specifically in Quran and the Hadith, and the others which a state, Islamic state, can determine itself. But I missed your point. What percentage of people are homosexual according to your idea?
Between 5 to 10%.
5 to 10%.
Actually, if I may make a comment on this, I have just read a hadith which is authentic, in which the Prophet said, in this instance, when two of same sex commit, homosexuality or, this sexual relations, then the doer as well as the one who is they should be killed.
Actually, I'm not an expert in Islamic law. That's not my subject. And why? This is because unless there is the will at the national level to establish and enforce Islamic law, there is no use in going into these discussions. So first of all, a revolution has to be brought about. And after that, there will be a decision that now Islamic law is to be enforced. Then we shall have dialogue among ourselves. What is really Islamic and what is something which has come from outside.
I'm an observer, I'm sorry to butt in. Regarding the statement that 5 to 10% people are homosexual, there is a very strong scientific study that regarding animals, in their natural habitat, they don't exhibit homosexuality. In a zoo, they do.
In a zoo, they do?
In a zoo, they do. There are 7 or 8 things, which include, for instance, obesity is also something that animals, get into in a zoo, but not in their natural habitat. Somewhere, the current day, modern day civilization is producing pressures and stresses which are causing this thing. I don't disagree with the figures, but the cause is something that we need to look at. Maybe the kind of solution that Dr. Israr is presenting will take care of this side. So somewhere sort of contesting that this is a natural thing. I think the natural thing is, of course,
heterosexual.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, see you.
I thank you all.